Hey, what's going on, Who That Nation? It is yours truly, TJ Jones, the host of the State of the Saints podcast. And we have a special guest back again here on the State of the Saints podcast from NewOrleansSaints.com. We got John DeShazier. JD, what's going on?
All's well. My audio's acting up a little bit, but everything's good on this end.
Okay, well, we appreciate you for being a part of the State of the Saints podcast, and hopefully, you can you at least hear me? Can you hear me?
I tell you what, TJ, I'm gonna have to go back to the other phone now because for some reason I don't know what the deal is. I don't know if it's the area I'm in or what. Let me see what's going on here.
Okay, well,
usually I'll do it off the phone, so everything's worked fine.
Okay. Well, if you have to use the other phone, that's fine.
Breaking up just a little bit, so let's see here.
Okay. All right. JD is working on some audio issues on his phone. He's in the car, so hopefully we can get that straight here. So we're going to try to get him back. JD, what's going on?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, we're good now?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, thank you so much for being a part of the State of the Saints podcast. Really do appreciate your time. And, the New Orleans Saints, they get their first loss in the last 9 games. It seems like everything that could go wrong did go wrong in this game. The 55 game, not allowing a 100-yard rusher. We seen a young Jalen Hurts just seemed like he was giving the Saints fits. I think they rushed for 246 yards. JD, what happened in this game?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is – and I don't want to say a lot of it is, it seemed like it was just one of those days, number one. You catch a team and you catch them on a bad day and you got the right recipe for them, and it looked that way for the Eagles. It took the Saints a half to kind of wake up in the game. Right. They scored 21 in the second half, but that first half was nothing for anyone to be proud of or be talking about, except for how you can correct those mistakes. And I don't know if Jalen Hurts was the perfect recipe for the Saints defense, but he certainly seemed to be on Sunday. Like I said, Doug Peterson in Philadelphia put together a real plan, and the Saints knew what was coming. You know who Jalen Hurts is. You've seen him play before, and so you know what he's capable of, and yet they just couldn't get a grasp on it. It was, I'd like to say it was just one of those days where the Saints, in winning 9 straight, they'd had a couple of games where they weren't great in those games. They just figured out how to win that day. Right. And on Sunday, man, they couldn't figure out how to win on that day to save themselves. By the time they pieced it together, Philly had enough of a lead and felt good enough about themselves because of, young quarterback. You if you can't hit him and you can't rattle him, he's got confidence, and he's a guy who's like Jalen Hurts, who's had a lot of success. It's going to be tough to get him off his marks, and they found that out. It was tough to get him off his marks. It was tough to rattle him. It was tough to frustrate him. They never did get a grasp on what he was and what he was doing.
Yeah. Look at that Jalen Hurts stats. He rushed for 106 yards. He threw for about 160 yards. So that's over 260 plus yards of a total offense. But, I mean, one thing that you had to be pretty impressed about, even if you're a Saints fan, was his poise. I mean, you look at these 2 quarterbacks, and I mentioned this on the show on another edition, that if you would have told a person that never watched football a day in their life, you have one guy that actually started in the game for the first time, choose one. It seems like Jalen Hurts was a little bit more poised than even Taysom Hill going into his 4th start. Would you agree?
Yeah, Jalen Hurts looked like he belongs. They drafted him in the 2nd round, and even when Philadelphia drafted him, you looked and you said, what are they doing? They've got Carson Wentz, and you figured, there's nowhere for Jalen Hurts to play for them. Well, who knew the bottom was going to fall out for Carson Wentz this year? Right. And then when you go to Jalen Hurts, he looked like a kid who has played for championships, even though they were in college.
Yeah.
But he looks like he belongs. He just looks, as you said, poised. He looks composed. Every adjective you can give for a guy who looks like he knows what he's doing. He looked like he knew what he was doing. Now, they didn't play him for the first 12 weeks of the season, and that benefited him. He got a chance to kind of absorb and learn. He didn't have to go in week 3, but still, man, It
Yeah.
was impressive to see what he was able to do. I mean, it was extremely impressive. If you're not a Saints fan, you got to be kind of proud actually to see what he was able to do and how he was able to do it. Unfortunately for the Saints, you don't like it because he won the game.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be impressed, though. I mean, he did a really good job, in the things that that Doug Peterson allowed him to do. He wasn't looking around if nothing was there. He used his legs, and like I said, he was just extremely confident in his game, and it really showed. You got this term out there saying, is he ready for prime time? He definitely was ready for prime time, and it didn't seem like the moment was too big for him. I mean, he definitely rose to the occasion. Well, from one quarterback to another, we talk about Jalen Hurts and talk a little bit about Taysom Hill. It's a little bit of a mixed bag here. Taysom Hill wasn't a terrible day. It was 20 of 38, 291 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he also had 2 turnovers. JD, this is his 4th start, and he has fumbled in all 4 games that he actually was the starting quarterback. What is it about Taysom Hill? All these good things that he's doing, but it just seems to me like he's still having these issues with the fumbling. What do you think about that?
Oh, that's alarming. He knows it. Coach Sean Payton has said it. That's alarming. You can't have the guy who is entrusted with running your offense, entrusted with directing your offense and making everything go. You can't have him putting the ball up for grabs. And the interception was a tough one. He threw it hot. It was a screen pass. He threw it too hard. That's going to happen from time to time. But the fumbles are alarming because he handles the ball so much. He will take off and run. They'll design runs for him. But if he continues to put the ball on the ground, what are you going to do as a coach? You can't continue to entrust him with the football if he's putting it on the ground. You don't want that issue to happen with anybody. If it was a running back, look, a running back who fumbles 4 times straight, you know what they call him? A former running back or a benched running back. I mean, it happens in the NFL, and guys get benched for it. So it's going to be difficult with him with that issue. He's got to clean that up. That is imperative. You can't put enough exclamation points behind it that he's got to hold on to the football and give yourself a chance. Now, Sunday's fumble, it was on the 4th and 2. It was on a sack. The ball was going to be turned over on downs anyway. Right. But still, you got to hold on to the ball. You got to hold on to the ball because the stat sheet doesn't say, it's 4th down, oopsie, no biggie. The stat sheet says a lost fumble, and you keep losing fumbles, you're going to end up losing your job in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all of the games he's been in, JD. I mean, you can even go back to that Green Bay Packer game. I mean, you had the Saints who actually forced the fumble, by the Green Bay Packers. And, I mean, the momentum was in their favor. He comes into the game, fumbles the football, gives the ball back to Green Bay. And, that's the reason why the Saints end up losing that game because of that fumble. And now you fast forward. I mean, you're still looking at 4 consecutive weeks with a fumble. And also with Sean Payton. I mean, I noticed in the press conference that he did on Monday, the Monday's press conference, he was talking about Taysom Hill, and he was a little bit more critical than we seen him be in the past about Taysom. I mean, he talked about some of those rocket passes. He also talked about some of his decision making. Is Sean Payton starting to get a tad bit frustrated with the quarterback play and some of the some of the decisions that Taysom is making? And do you think that we might be seeing Jameis sooner rather than later?
Well, I don't know if frustration is the word for it. I think the frustration is from losing a game that you felt like you should have been prepared to win. And I don't want to downplay Philadelphia. I mean, that's tough to do. They were 3-8-1 coming into the game, right. But they're an NFL team and they've got NFL players. And on any given Sunday, we hear that all the time. People think it's a cliche. They think you win games on paper. No, you got to go out there and do the work. And they didn't go out there and do the work. And so I think that was the frustrating part. And that's probably what brought out the frustration. But when you're looking at the film, as Sean Payton did, and you're seeing, whether it's, Taysom not going far enough into his progression and not getting to the open receiver, or maybe there's daylight and he doesn't take off. Now you start saying, okay, how can we coach this out of him? And you get a little frustrated. And I mean, when you lose a game like that, there, as he likes to say, there's a lot of dirty hands. So you can't, at a game like that, you don't come and say, well, we missed 2 field goals, and we turned it over a couple times on offense, and they ran for 246 yards, but so-and-so played well. No, nobody, you can't pencil out, nobody can't single out anybody for a good game in a game like that. So I think that's what happens as much as anything, where he's saying, look, a quarterback didn't do some things good, and we need him to play better. And, I think he singled out, he didn't mention Will Lutz by name, but the kicking game, you missed 2, an early field goal 2 weeks in a row. He mentioned Andrews Pete, who didn't play well in that game. And, of course, you got to mention the defense, and maybe collectively, instead of calling out a name, you just call out collectively, because when a team runs for 246 yards, that's everybody. That ain't just, this guy missed a gap or this guy missed a tackle. That's everybody that lined up defensively. So, I think that was the frustration, that you play in a game, you feel like you know what's going to happen. And he mentioned that it was kind of a week of practice where you almost felt like something wasn't going to happen, something wasn't going to go right.
Right.
And when you get that feeling and it happens, then you ticked off. And so I'm not necessarily, calling out people, but you're ticked off because
I just think that when you look at Andrews Pete, it was kind of reminiscent of when Jamal Brown was having some of those issues at left tackle. It wasn't on the borderlines of the famous quote, "I've seen enough," but you can really tell that Andrews Pete is starting to be in the doghouse of Sean Payton. What's going on with Andrews Pete? You see him you'll see him 1 week, it seems like he's mauling over guys. And then the next week, you see him all over the ground. What is it about Andrews Pete? And if you could guess it, why is he so inconsistent at the offensive line position right now?
Well, that's the thing. If I had the answer to that, man, he probably he wouldn't be. He just got to get himself together, and some of that, is whether it's balance or whether it's intensity or whatever it is, he's got to get it together now. Again, he wasn't alone. On the 4th down sack, the pressure came from Taysom Hill's left, the defensive line's right, and that was, I think Josh Hill and Teron Armstead over there who allowed that pressure. Now, you want to see the quarterback get rid of the ball quicker, and maybe that probably might not happen. But if he's got to hold on to it because the route hadn't developed, then you got to be able to hold up in your protection. Andrews has struggled at times. He'd probably be the first one to tell you, but I've seen Cesar Ruiz unfortunately give up a big hit. And he was, the culprit when Drew Brees, got hurt against San Francisco. That was him who got beaten. We've even seen Ryan Ramczyk give up a few this year, and that first couple of years that was unheard of. So it's just been sometimes where you haven't gotten the complete across the line play. But Andrews, look, again, if he can't get it together, it's going to be one of those situations where, regardless of the contract status, he'll be sitting watching, Nick Easton play that position because, you're charged with protecting the quarterback. You're charged with, opening up lanes or at least holding up your guy in the run game. And if it's not happening with you, they'll go with someone else.
Yeah. Well, Jay, let me ask you this. Do you think that a lot of the offensive line issues could be the fact that Taysom Hill holding on to the ball too long? And sometimes maybe the offensive line is, holding the wall down for him in order for him to, read between his progression and throw it. But he ends up getting sacked because he's not throwing the ball, early enough. Like they talk about the quarterback having a clock in his head. And if he's holding on to the football, wouldn't that make the offensive line look a tad bit worse than they're actually playing in reality?
Oh, absolutely. It goes hand in hand. They've got to have that cohesion. And that's the thing about, I think people, there was this cry, I guess, for, the Saints to bench Drew Brees and, this and that and the third, and he's washed and blah, 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 and his army. But you see the things that you miss when he's not out there because he's played so long. He's got that internal clock. He understands if the line is struggling, I got to get rid of it quicker.
Right.
Now, Taysom Hill will tell you, I'm sure, I need to get rid of the ball quicker because he's seen what has happened, when he doesn't get rid of it quickly. But The flip side of that is the offensive line gets paid to block, and they'll probably tell you, okay, we got to protect better. I'm sure, both of them, neither one of them is going to point the finger at the other one, but both of them are guilty. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those where, the line ain't going to point at the quarterback ain't going to point at the line, but the quarterback and the line are equally guilty because he's got to get the ball out of his hand. He has to get rid of the ball on time. But when he's not getting rid of the ball on time, the line's got to hold up just a little bit better. They might have to give him an extra beat. They might have to give him an extra second. They might have to because, as much as we have seen Taysom Hill play, he's still an extremely inexperienced quarterback. That was his fourth NFL start. All those other plays were, little gimmick plays here and there, and he might throw a pass or, he's probably more likely going to run with it. So he didn't have a consistent resume of playing quarterback, and now he's kind of feeling his way a little bit, and the line's going to have to be a little bit more careful with him because, hey, he's not the guy that you're accustomed to having back there. Again, Drew Brees covered up a lot of sins over the years because of his experience and because he understands what's going on. So he knew, okay, we ain't having a good night on the line. I got to get rid of this thing fast. Well, Taysom Hill, that hadn't set in on him yet. That's something that you wish would have set in on him before now, but it hasn't, unfortunately. So that's something he's got to figure out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about that sometimes, and, when we used to have like those NFL top 100 interviews, like when they used to be focusing on a player, you hear different defenders in the NFC South. They always say that, I should have, on this day, I should have had about 2 or 3 sacks on Drew, but anytime I get close to him, he throws the ball at the ground, he throws the ball away. And sometimes, because of that, the numbers can be a little bit misconstrued, like he can make the offensive line look a lot better than they actually are. If, let's just say, for example, if Taysom got rid of maybe, 3 of those passes, I mean, you only have 2 sacks instead of 5. So, maybe the offensive line numbers will look different. But that like you said, that goes to show you how important Drew Brees is and what he can actually do to help the team. You never really see Drew Brees taking a crucial fumble late in the game like that. You rarely ever see anything like that. But from one quarterback to another, I want to talk to you a little bit about Taysom Hill and something that Sean Payton said on the Huddle and Flow podcast, Steve Weiss, Jim Trotter's podcast. He talked about Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill. JD, you had a lot of people in Who Dat Nation thought that maybe Taysom Hill was starting over Jameis because of experience in the Saints offensive scheme or something that he was doing at practice. But we now learned that it was more so of a commitment that Sean Payton made to Taysom Hill in the offseason before Jameis even got to the team about allowing him to get an opportunity if the opportunity presents itself. But he also talked very highly about Jameis Winston. What do you think about Jameis Winston's future with the New Orleans Saints? Do you feel like Sean Payton really believes in Jameis? And do you think that maybe because of who we're going up against, the Kansas City Chiefs, who are a high-powered offense, will we see Jameis Winston possibly in a game versus the Kansas City Chiefs because of some of the things that he can do well?
I mean, as far as him playing, I think anything's a possibility. Nothing's off the table. I personally, I almost feel like it almost wouldn't be fair to him to put him out there after you've had somebody else start 4 games and Taysom Hill's 3-1. So it's almost like, okay, we'll just ride it on out until Drew gets back. Now, but Jameis has talent. He's been in the building longer now. Putting him out earlier probably would have been less fair to him because he didn't have the offseason. I keep saying that, and people don't understand. Not having that offseason is tremendous because you don't get a chance to build a cohesion. You don't get a chance to build a camaraderie. You don't necessarily understand, Michael Thomas likes the ball here and Emmanuel Sanders likes the ball there. And, this guy can go up and get it for me. And this guy, all those things you find out in training camp and in OTAs and mini camps. And unfortunately, you don't have all of that. Now, is the quarterback of the future in the building? That's what Sean Payton says. Now, Jameis Winston's on a 1-year contract. Mm-hmm. But what Jameis Winston, I'm sure the commitment to Jameis Winston is, hey, if you come back, you're going to have a chance to compete for this starting job. And if you're Jameis Winston, that's got to be at least a little bit enticing to you because you're talking about going to a winning program, whereas Now is Jameis Winston a starting quarterback in the NFL? I believe so. I think everybody believes so.
Yeah.
But how many starting jobs are there going to be available in the offseason? And bigger than that, how many are going to be available for an unrestricted free agent? Because a lot of teams that are looking for quarterbacks will be trying to draft a quarterback because you get to build fresh. You get to start over with a new quarterback as opposed to building with a veteran quarterback, and they'll expect them to hit the ground running and you be in playoff contention. If you're a new coach, you say, well, you know what? I get me a new quarterback, and I get me 5 years to kind of build this thing around him. So you got that to take into account. And if you're Jameis, there's nothing much on your resume, if at all, for this season because you've been a backup. So you go to another team and you can't say, well, hey, look at what I did at Tampa. They say, oh, okay, well, at Tampa it didn't go so good for you. But we do know what your talent is. But I think being with the Saints, I think taking another shot with the Saints can work for him. As you mentioned with Sean Payton on the Huddle and Flow, it was a commitment to Taysom. And I think it was good of him to stay with his commitment because, he made the commitment before they signed Jameis, as he mentioned. Hey, if something happens to Drew, I'm going to give you a shot to play quarterback. And so something happened to Drew. He gave Taysom the shot to do something at quarterback as he promised him. And all things considered, I understand that he's played uneven. I understand that he hadn't been Drew Brees. I understand that, there's been times where he hadn't played well. He's put the ball on the ground, and all those things factor into it. But if you tell me before the season, Drew Brees is going to miss 4 games, Taysom Hill's going to win 3 of them, I think anybody in Saints Nation would say, you know what, I'll take that. I'll be okay with that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, now under the harsh light of you put it under the harsh glare and you say, okay, yeah, they won 3, but they ain't look good. And, then they lost against a team they should have beaten, so, everything's in the moment. It doesn't look as good as it might be overall. But if you'd told me before the season that the Saints would miss 4 games with Drew Brees, they beat 10-3, and Taysom Hill would win 3 of those games.
Right.
I would say, okay, let's move on to week 14 then, because I'm good with that. And I think anybody else would have said that. So now it's just that if he'd have been 4-0, he'd have certainly bought himself a lot more goodwill going into the Kansas City game.
Right.
But still, 3-1 is 3-1. Now he had to get some help to do it, but so did Teddy last year when Teddy was playing. Yep. Now Teddy did get into a groove. I will say that. Mm-hmm. Teddy played well, and Teddy didn't turn it over. That was the big thing. Teddy didn't turn it over. And so that's the big issue with Taysom Hill is the turnovers. Those are alarming. Those worry you to death because you're giving away opportunities and you're already putting a lot more, I don't want to say stress, but a lot more responsibility on the defense and a lot more responsibility on the special teams to where they're not in a position to where they can have subpar games. So the defense gives up 246 yards rushing, and they lose the game. The special teams misses a couple of field goals, and they lose the game. Right. Whereas in past years with a Drew Brees, maybe you win those games because of who he is, because he gets the offense together. So that's the thing that really kind of alarms you with the turnovers is you're taking opportunities away from yourself. But, I applaud Sean Payton for standing with his word. I also applaud him for telling Jameis Winston, hey, if you come back here, you got a chance to be a quarterback of a team that, wins division championships, that gets to the playoffs. And once you get to the playoffs, you got a chance. I don't care what people say. I don't care what your record is once you get in there. Right. Once you get in there, you got a chance.
Absolutely.
And so he'll have a chance.
Yeah. I think about the game against the Kansas City Chiefs, and, I guess, like you said, nothing's really set in stone. But I do look at, like, Sean Payton. We all know that he doesn't like to allow history to repeat itself. He pays attention to detail. And, I can't help to think that maybe Sean Payton is thinking about what happened with Teddy Bridgewater. I really feel like Sean wanted Teddy Bridgewater to be the successor to Drew Brees. He wanted him to be with the team for the foreseeable future. I don't think he bet on Teddy coming into the game, starting 5 games and winning all 5, and it causing him to leave the organization because of a better opportunity. To me, if Taysom is struggling, it would not surprise me if Sean keeps Jameis on the bench. Just for the simple fact that maybe he feels like he can fix some of the issues with Jameis. Like I think a lot of people give Jameis a bad rep. I understand about the 30 interceptions, but you also have to look at the coaching as well, and you also have to look at how Tom Brady is performing at the quarterback position too. I mean, he's throwing interceptions at a high rate out there in Tampa as well. So sometimes it has a lot to do with what the coaches are asking you to do, and I do feel like Sean feels like there are a lot of good things and good qualities with Jameis he can possibly fix. So maybe he will want to keep Jameis on the bench, to try to hide him out. You don't want to see, Jameis playing at a high level, not turning the ball over, making some good reads. And the next thing you know, somebody picking up the phone, calling Jameis Winston's agent and saying, hey, well, we have an opportunity out here for him, and start throwing him the money, and we end up losing him. So it wouldn't surprise me at all, if he tries to keep Jameis in his back pocket.
Well, now the only thing about that is Sean Payton get paid to win, and Sean Payton want to win. They want to win the Super Bowl. So if Jameis is the one that can get them wins while Drew Brees is out, look here, man, they're going to go with him. They're going to go with the best opportunity. And that's the thing going into this Kansas City game, because Taysom somewhat opened the door. Mm-hmm. We don't really know if Jameis will be in the role, or if he will play, or if he will get some snaps. We know he's capable. Again, he's been in the system long enough now to where he probably has a better grasp of it and probably has a better understanding of it. Now, does that mean a whole lot? Well, yeah, sometimes it does. And as you mentioned, in Tampa Bay, that was a difficult situation because I think he felt like he had to play hero ball a lot with Tampa Bay.
Yes.
Especially with the way they designed the offense. No risk it, no biscuit, let's throw it deep, that kind of stuff. He played a lot of hero ball. But we also have to remember that Jameis threw for 30-plus touchdowns and 5,000 yards last year.
Right.
And so, he knows how to get numbers. What you want to do is take those interceptions out of him, tell him, throw it away, throw it into the ground. Don't take a sack if you need to. You got in a good enough defense. I don't think he believed that with Tampa. I think he believed, I got to get it all. And we've seen some of that with Drew Brees in past years, where Drew might have had 15, 16 interceptions because he had played some hero ball because he just didn't feel like he could win otherwise. So if you can get that out of Jameis, you will have one hell of a quarterback, because he's got some skills. He's got some natural skills that when guys say he can throw it, they mean he can throw it. He can fit it into some tight windows with that arm he's got. So, you almost want to see what he can do, and yet, we'll see what Sean Payton decides to do with it.
Yeah. Let's move on and talk about Drew Brees. A lot of speculation about when Drew Brees is going to be back. I think on tomorrow he's going to be evaluated to see where he is as far as his progress. A lot of people are wondering, when is he going to come back? Is it going to be against Kansas City? Is it going to be versus the Minnesota Vikings, or even the last game of the season against the Carolina Panthers? Have you heard anything about Drew Brees? And if you can guess, what game would you think would be the game where we actually see number 9 back in the Saints uniform as a starter?
I really don't know, and that's the God's honest truth. I've seen him, warm up a little bit and throw a little bit, but from what I heard, he's still having discomfort with his ribs. And a quarterback who's got tender ribs, discomfort with his ribs, it's going to be hard to play. That's just the way it is, because at some point he's going to get hit. He's going to get hit, and God forbid a lineman also lands on him when he hits him, but that's a very real possibility. And if you already have pain in your ribs, then it's going to be impossible for a quarterback to play. If I had to bet, I would say Minnesota. Mm-hmm. I would say Minnesota. And the reason I would say Minnesota is I would say because playing Kansas City, if you're already tender and then having to play on a short week, that would not be conducive to having sore ribs. That just, you're already tender and you play it on a short week. I don't think that would be a good deal. But, he's a tough dude. But again, as tough as he is, even he's had to realize this is something that's got me on the sideline. I can't just walk out there and shake this off. This ain't a bad shoulder. This isn't a bad leg. This ain't a bad foot. This is ribs, and this is tender, and this thing hurts when I try to throw the football. And if I take some contact, it's gonna hurt even worse. I don't know how many. I think was he up to 11 cracked ribs or something like that.
Yeah, 11. It was 11. Yeah. 11.
Yeah, he was up to 11 cracked ribs. Look, man, it depends on the degree of the fracture of the rib, because some of them might have been a little less cracked than others. Right. So you got to go through the entire healing process. You got to get some callus there. You got to kind of build it up, because you're going to get hit. And I don't care if you wear a flak jacket or not, it's going to hurt when you get hit. And a dude who's 290 pounds lands on top of you, that's going to hurt. So he's got to get completely healed from that. If I had to make a guess, if I had to bet, something, I'd say the Minnesota game.
Yeah. I look at this game against the Kansas City Chiefs, and I get it. Who that nation, they want to see Drew Brees go up against Patrick Mahomes, because I think it's mostly for the Who that nation. It's about the Saints, seeing where they are. As far as like being one of those elite teams, you have to look at the Kansas City Chiefs game like a measuring stick, right? They're the world champions. Everybody is going for them. They only lost one game, and that was to the Las Vegas Raiders. And a lot of people want to know if the Saints have what it takes to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, but I don't feel like you need to rush Drew Brees back, because, like you said, if he goes out there and he's playing, and all of a sudden, I don't know, Chris Jones lands on him, and he gets tackled, and next thing you know, he re-aggravates the injury. Now we're looking at not having Drew Brees for the playoffs, postseason. So I think that it's more important to have him, going down the line, him being as close to 100% as possible, versus going up against Patrick Mahomes. I understand it. I get it. We want to win that game. We want to put ourselves in the best position to win, but not at the expense of, possibly losing Drew Brees for the entire season. So, that would be absolutely crazy. I think you really have to be careful with this type of situation. We know Drew Brees is a competitor. We heard him talking in interviews about wanting to come back, but I don't think that would be smart, especially if he's not fully prepared. But also, JD, about playoff positioning. With this loss to the Eagles, the Saints move out of the number 1 spot. They move into the number 2 spot because of Green Bay Packers winning, the game head to head. They're both 10-3. Is it a issue this year? Like we all know about the pandemic. We know about COVID-19. There are no fans in the stands or anything like that. Is home field advantage as important this year as it been in years past?
No, I don't. I wouldn't say so. I've been to all the Saints games. I think they're 5-2 on the road, and it's not the issue that it normally would be, because there's no momentum. You got to generate your own juice, and there's no fans there to help you generate that momentum. The only thing that I would say would be an issue with the Saints or any other team, to be honest with you, the way the NFL goes now, the only thing that would be an issue is driving rain or wind, heavy winds. Those are the things that really affect what an offense wants to do. If it's driving rain, or if the wind's blowing really, really hard. Because for the most part, if it's snowing or anything like that, man, teams in the NFL, they throw the ball now. They're gonna throw it. Right. And good running teams, ground games travel. Right. You can run in any conditions. So you don't worry so much about that. And like I said, teams in the NFL now, the way it's built, the way the game is, you're throwing all the time. So you don't necessarily worry about, if it's cold. The thing is, if it's windy or if it's just downpouring rain, that makes it a lot more difficult to do what you want to do in the passing game. Right. But other than that, going on the road, I understand, fans are, you might not, I don't want to I want to see them go to Green Bay or anything like that. Look, you're going to have to beat a good team it's the playoffs. You're going to have to beat good teams anyway. Right. You might have to win at Green Bay. And I think you have to build a team that's capable of winning at Green Bay. I think this team is constructed the way they are with the defense, and they can run the ball. I think they're constructed to where they can beat Green Bay. Now, Green Bay is hot. Right. And everything you see about Green Bay, man, that Devontae Adams is a menace. Yeah. He is something. And the way Aaron Rodgers is playing, it makes you look at them and say, man, that's going to be a tough out.
Right.
But you know what? If you want to win a championship, you're gonna have to be you're gonna have to beat them in New Orleans or you got to beat them in Green Bay, one or the other,
Right.
and they're gonna be a tough out regardless. So it really doesn't matter where you get them; it's gonna be a tough out anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like the Saints have what it takes to beat Green Bay, and like I said earlier, to me, home field advantage doesn't mean that much. It's not like you're going into a hostile environment, a Lambeau Field, where the crowd is going to be a factor or issue, anything like that. I mean, I just feel like the Saints have what it takes to beat them. You mentioned the running game. You mentioned even some of the passing game that the Saints, have. I mean, it's not like the Saints are throwing the ball down the field, bombs away. all of the passes are short, intermediate passes. So I think they have what it takes. And then also, I talked about this earlier on my earlier podcast. I really don't buy into that whole dome teams can't travel, to cold weather situations because, I mean, I just think about the players that are on the team, like the colleges that they play for. These guys have played in cold weather, and these guys are from all parts of the country, so I don't know. I just think that's kind of silly to think about. I get the, conditions and all that, but I do feel like it depends on the players. But I don't feel like the number one seed is that coveted position this season. Now, if it was a season like we had regularly, where we had fans in the stands, then I would think so. But this year, I really don't look at it that way. Finally, do you think that the New Orleans Saints could possibly get that number one seed again? Could they possibly jump the Green Bay Packers, maybe run this gauntlet of these last 3 games and be that number one seed? And how confident are you that they can make that happen?
Well, I mean, it's going to be tough. 1, you got Kansas City coming up. 2, you got Minnesota coming up, which is a good team, especially if Dalvin Cook is healthy and they're running the football the way they run the football. And Green Bay, from what I can see, has a softer schedule going down the stretch. So it's going to be tough to get back to number one. And plus, the Saints need Green Bay to lose a game.
Right.
They can't finish equal to them because of the tiebreak. So they need Green Bay to lose one, and they need to be perfect. Is it possible? Of course it is. Anything's possible. But, if you just look at what's on paper, you say it's going to be tough. Now, looking at what's on paper, you figured Saints were going to beat Philadelphia too. So, it's one of those things where, it's still got to be out there. And Green Bay is going to be playing some division rivals down the stretch. And the last thing a division rival want to do is lose to you.
Right.
They know you better than anybody else knows you, and they're not afraid of you. Most of them can't stand your guts, so they'll play you hard. So that's going to be, that's what's going to work in the Saints' advantage. Now, if they beat Kansas City with Pat Mahomes, and if the Saints are without Drew Brees, even if they don't get the number one seed, I feel really good about the Saints where they will be going heading into the playoffs. Whether they're the 1 seed or the 2 seed or 3 seed, it wouldn't matter. If they beat a team like that, minus the guy who really runs the thing, then that will tell you a lot about what the Saints are made of. And look, I expect them to play better. I don't know what that means on Sunday, but after this last game, they're ticked off. They're pissed off. They don't like the way that went down, and they shouldn't as professionals. But they don't like the way that went down, so I expect them to play better. Again, I don't know what that's going to mean because you're playing a really, really, really talented offense with Pat Mahomes and the Cheetah, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce at tight end, and Mecole Hardman at the other receiver. And if Sammy Watkins is healthy, and then you got Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the backfield, they got a lot of good stuff on offense, a lot of good stuff. But if the Saints can hang with them, and the Saints, we saw what the Saints did to Tampa Bay. Is Tampa Bay as good an offense as Kansas City? Well, coming into that game, everybody thought they were, and the Saints completely shut them down. Right. So I think the Saints can do some things now. So it remains to be seen. But I'm very interested in seeing what happens on Sunday because I think that's going to go a lot toward building the Saints' confidence going into the playoffs. Either way, whether they win or lose, I just think they're going to play a lot better because they got to be ticked off about what happened in Philly.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think we're all looking for, a better showing from the Saints. They always seem to rise to the occasion when they play some of these high-profile teams. I mean, we seen it back in 2018, against the Rams and also against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We seen it in that game versus the 49ers. So, and we've seen it this year versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So hopefully they can replicate some of those things. I mean, they were in the thick of things. The majority of those games they actually won. So hopefully we can be on the receiving end of a victory going up against the world champs. JD, thank you so much for being a part of the State of the Saints podcast. Before you go, let everyone know how they can get in touch with you.
Well, you can hit me on Twitter at John DeShazier. That's where I am all the time. Also, I'm on Instagram, although, man, I can't remember the last time I posted something, but I am on Instagram too. It's just, but mostly on Twitter. I actually interact with people on Twitter and I pay attention to what's going on. So that's where you can find me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Make sure that you check them out on Twitter. And JD, thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you on NewOrleansSaints.com, calling some of the Saints games down the stretch. We appreciate it.
All right, TJ. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.